All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's try this again. Welcome back to the channel. It is Wednesday, and you know what that means. Wednesday Wisdom. And time for another addition to our series on an introduction to the Hermetica and the history of the Hermetica and the lost wisdom of the Pharaohs. This book is by Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy, authors of other interesting books as well, including the Jesus Mysteries. But how you doing, ladies and gentlemen? I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you joining me each time. And I kind of wonder because it's fascinating. I don't really have to do these any particular way. And so I could do like I normally do, read and ramble and go on for an hour, or I could just read simply and do a short, 5, 10 minute thing. And there's many different ways we could do this, ladies and gentlemen. I'm liking that painting in the back. It's looking good. It is super bright out today, ladies and gentlemen, meaning it is super white out. We got looks like 2 feet. I don't know about feet, but quite a few inches of snow of fresh powder out there, and it is coming down. So hopefully it's beautiful weather wherever you are, ladies and gentlemen. I consider this beautiful. Every kind of weather is beautiful as long as you don't have to traverse too far through the elements. But with that being said, thank you for joining me once again. Hope you got yourself a beverage, cold beverage or a hot beverage. I enjoy tea in the mornings, colder beverages later in the evenings, of course. But enough silliness for now, ladies and gentlemen. What does the tea say? The tea always says something. It says, your potential self is infinite. So that's a lesson for us. But if you're here for the Hermetica, then all right, let's dive right into the demise of thrice great Hermes. So we've gone through, just to catch anybody up that has missed the previous episodes, and if you have, go back through this series on my channel. It's in the playlist section. But we're only about 10 pages in, and we started with the Forgotten Spiritual Classic, which told us the history of the Egyptian Hermes Trismegistus and the thrice great and where that comes from, and the Egyptian and Greek ideas and the influence it had to cause and inspire the Renaissance, which gave birth to our modern age. So this knowledge is very powerful. And the impact of people it's had, or the impact it's had on great people such as Leonardo da Vinci and many, many more. William Blake, Kepler, Copernicus, Isaac Newton. That was actually an interesting point. Oh, and even poet philosophers who surrounded the court of Queen Elizabeth I, as we read last week. We found out that even Queen Elizabeth was using Hermeticists, which she called her personal philosopher, but he was nonetheless a Hermeticist. Then we went into the history of the Hermetica and how it went from Alexandria in Egypt all the way to 415, and when Alexandria was destroyed and the Holy Roman Empire no longer would tolerate this, began what became a previously unknown phenomenon that became known as book burning. For the West, the 5th century ushered in the 1,000-year period, appropriately known as the Dark Ages. During this period, the wisdom of the ages, or the esoteric, occult wisdom of the Hermetic teachings that survived from Egypt and probably Atlantis before it and many other times before that. But the sages fled to the newly emerging Arab culture. And the same thing happened there. After a couple hundred years, the, what should we call it? The religious leaders of the day began to see these people practicing. Well, let's just read here a little bit. By the beginning of the 9th century, the first university was established in Baghdad called the House of Wisdom. Now, if you've been here before in these videos, we've gone over this already, but I just find it important to continue to add context to where we go next. So I'll get through this quickly. Many pagan works were translated. The sciences that had reached such heights in Alexandria were significantly developed. And the ancient pagan spiritual wisdom, ladies and gentlemen, was covertly studied and practiced. From its exalted position among the sacred scriptures of Egyptian spirituality, the Hermetica became the secret inspiration for important undercurrent in Islamic philosophy, and the holy book of unorthodox religious sects such as the Sabians or the Sabians. Now, unfortunately, in this area, Islam was beginning to succumb to the same desire for orthodoxy that had arisen in the Christian West, and what ended up being the destruction of Alexandria and many quote-unquote pagan or great spiritual esoteric wisdom centers. They closed down these pagan temples, in other words. Same thing happens in the East. And so, once again, the Hermetic wisdom escapes on the four winds. With the heirs and the propagators of paganism, it says, we are the heirs and the propagators. Who else have set in order the harbors and the rivers? Who else have taught the hidden wisdom? And who else has the deity revealed itself, given oracles and told about the future, if not the famous men among the pagans? The pagans have made known all of this. They have discovered the art of healing the body, and they have also made known the art of healing the soul. They have filled the earth with settled forms of government and with wisdom, which is the highest good. Without paganism, the world would be empty and miserable. That was Thabit ibn Qurra, with a beautiful statement defending his traditions, which was called paganism by these religious leaders. He was defending himself. He said, we are the ones that have done these great things that you guys want to take claim for. Another unorthodox group within the Islamic Empire, who also traced their ancestry back to the thrice great Hermes, the Hermetic wisdom, was the poets and mystics known as the Sufis. And we all love the Sufi mystics and poets, ladies and gentlemen. At least those of you that have been here with me for the Wisdom of the Ages series, because we'd get Hafiz in there every now and then. His poetry was so wonderful, so mystical, and so spiritual and inspiring. I think we all need more of those things in our lives. And so then we came to Hermes and the reawakening of Europe. And long story short, this Hermetic wisdom and Platonic philosophy made it to Florence, Italy. And then maybe about 30 years later, after founding the new Platonic Academy and influencing Da Vinci and Michelangelo and Botticelli and Raphael and all these people, we all know so well, but we have no clue that this, somewhat occult or hidden knowledge had such an impact on those greatest of individuals throughout history. There's something about a connection to the great wisdom of the ages and the great ability to create a life or to create a legacy that is important for not just the individual, but for humanity itself, for the upliftment or the enlightenment of humanity. And that's what we're all about, ladies and gentlemen. We're trying to increase the quality of life. We're here to seek to achieve and maintain happiness through an enlightenment, through an awareness, a new understanding, a new wisdom. Wednesday wisdom. That's why you're here. So thank you for being here. If you haven't subscribed already, consider subscribing. And if you have, then share this with somebody that you think is like-minded and might get something out of this. Because once this knowledge arrived in Florence and influenced these people, it was what began a time period which we now know as the emergence of a glorious new culture in Florence, signaling the end of the Dark Ages, ladies and gentlemen. We call this period the Renaissance, or the Renaissance, meaning rebirth. I find this important for repeating here, which is a fitting name, for at the heart of the Hermetic philosophy is the idea of being spiritually reborn. Now, so this knowledge and wisdom, the Hermetic and Platonic wisdom comes to, so see, I went to Alexandria and then the Middle East and then back to Europe, well, you know, back to the West, to Florence, causes the Renaissance. This is like 2,000 years later. Students of the quote-unquote new learning, as it says here in the book, as the Florentine experiment became known, were sent out as emissaries, beginning new movements wherever they went. And so this was right around the same time as the printing press. And so later, on the first page of On the Revolution of Celestial Orbs, published in 1543, Copernicus himself, ladies and gentlemen, quotes the words of thrice great Hermes, saying, quote, "The sun is the visible God." Now think about it. I don't know if it's snowy where you are, but think about it when it's gray and overcast and rainy or snowy or whatever, and how you feel. And then think about it when the sunshine comes out and it hits your skin and it, hits your eyes and it lightens you up. I don't know if it's just me or not, ladies and gentlemen, but there's something about the sun. The sun is the visible God. And these ancient Atlanteans, ancient Egyptians, Sumerians, whatever it be, these different cultures knew the importance or the power of the sun and didn't disrespect it. And so I'm not saying we all need to become sun worshipers, because that's a different thing. And keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, disclaimer here, there are very dark sides to, different kinds of cults throughout history. And that's not what I'm talking about here. When I'm talking, like in earlier videos, we referenced Pythagoreanism and Chaldean oracles and Greek myths, Platonic and Stoic philosophy, just as reference to the kind of wisdom that was being taught back in these times to go along with Hermetic philosophy. I don't claim to know anything about those, different all I know is that they are wisdom from a time past. So if there are groups and dark practices connected with any of these kind of different occultic traditions, occult meaning hidden, so OCCULT is occult, hidden, or of a special knowledge or special, group. But a cult, like ACULT, is a totally different thing, ladies and gentlemen. So, I mean, there could be some gray areas crossing, but what we're doing here in this, reading this and talking about this, is not to talk about, dark cult stuff. I'm talking about philosophy and wisdom and history and the way these philosophies and this ancient knowledge of a sort has impacted and profoundly influenced the greatest times throughout our history and the greatest minds throughout our history. And so that's what I'm getting with, and that's what I'm getting at here. So, if you're somebody who's into the darker side of things, and I find that to be unfortunate, and maybe you should consider, because the light is surrounded by dark, ladies and gentlemen. It's the polarity. Remember, once again, there is positive and negative polarities, or electric and magnetic polarities. And they are one in a union of a sense. Like, I think about it like a magnetic field. If you've ever seen a toroidal field or a magnetic field, you have a circular polarity that connects in the middle and goes back out to each pole and creates this, anyways. I don't know where I was going with that. I'm just trying to say that, don't take this the wrong way. I'm talking about light, enlightenment, philosophy here, and, increasing the quality of humanity and our own selves through a knowledge and an understanding of a great lost, or maybe not so lost, but hidden wisdom, ancient wisdom. So I found it, I was thinking about this yesterday, and I thought it important to state that or declare that, because there is darkness and there is light, and there are two polarities, And wherever the light goes, there could be darkness around it, as there is shadows in the world of reality as we look out and see the light shining. But we can choose, ladies and gentlemen, we can choose. So stand with the light. Stand with the light. And all it takes in a room of darkness is a tiny little flame. And it will cast a great light. And the darkness is forced to move away. It's like an opposite magnet. When you try to push two ends, or the same end of two opposite magnets together, they repel each other through a natural force. And so you can think of darkness and light metaphorically in life in this way. So, sorry, rambling. Hermes, the reawakening of Europe, causes the Renaissance. Dark Ages are over. And as in Alexandria 1,000 years earlier, the Renaissance viewed science, art, literature, and religion as parts of a united whole to be studied together. I think we're getting there, ladies and gentlemen. All aspects of human life were opened up as legitimate areas of investigation. This was bad for the Roman Catholic Church. And in 1492, they squashed Florence because they couldn't have this, but it was too late. Even though the heady days, it says here in the book, of the new academy were over, the suppression was too late to prevent the ripples of the influence spreading out ever outwards. Florentine scholars were dispersed across Europe, becoming known as the fifth essence. Very cool. And so then we come to, ladies and gentlemen, talks a little bit there about Sir Isaac Newton being influenced. There's a vision of this new Hermetic religion, was fated to fade because it got squashed down once again. In 1600, they're like, you can't have that idea. And so here we have it, ladies and gentlemen. We come to the demise of thrice great Hermes, which is what we are on today, the section we are on today, the demise of thrice great Hermes. So let's see where we go in this fascinating story of the history of the Hermetica and the lost wisdom of the Pharaohs, particularly Thoth, who wasn't a pharaoh, he was a god among the pharaohs. But anyways, once again, I'm not claiming to be an expert or a scholar. I'm a researcher, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm just reading through this and learning just as much as you are, even though this isn't the first time I've read through this. This story gives to me some kind of extreme resonation of importance of this knowledge and this history of this lost wisdom, or maybe wisdom that has been swept under the rug, being titled as pagan wisdom for so long. The demise of thrice great Hermes. So we're once again reading from The Lost Wisdom of the Pharaohs, Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy, for educational and entertainment purposes, for purposes of teaching and commentary, and fun, because this is fun, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're having fun. If you are, smash the like button. The demise of thrice great Hermes. It sounds sad already, but at the time, quote, this is what the book says now, at the time as Milton was writing, however, the ground was being cut away from under the authenticity of the Hermetica. So let's go back here to get a little context. In 1640, the poet John Milton, who we read some of his poetry in the Wisdom of the Ages series, which we used to do on Wednesdays. It's another playlist. If you check that out on the channel, there's tons of great poetry and literature, and me extrapolating and Wayne extrapolating on it. But so in 1640, poet John Milton celebrated the wisdom of Hermes, writing, "Or let my lamp at midnight hour be seen in some high and lonely tower." I'm thinking that's like talking about enlightenment, maybe. "Where I may oft outwatch the bear with thrice great Hermes or unsphere." Outwatch the bear. For some reason, my mind thought of a constellation, Ursa Minor or Ursa Major. With thrice great Hermes or unsphere. See, you could look into each of these lines really deeply. I'll get through this. The spirit of Plato to unfold. What worlds or what vast regions hold the immortal mind that hath forsook her mansion in this fleshy nook. Super deep, ladies and gentlemen. We'll have to go over that in the future. So that's what John Milton wrote, celebrating the wisdom of Hermes. And now we're at the same time, the book continues, as Milton was writing, however, the ground was being cut away from under the authenticity, of the Hermetica. So people were beginning, what do you call them nowadays? Where debunk. They were debunkers, ladies and gentlemen. They were beginning to say this is not real. So the book continues here, quote, previously these works had been believed to be of extreme antiquity, dating back to the time of the Pharaohs. In 1614, a scholar called Isaac Casaubon published a textual analysis of the Hermetica, which showed quite correctly that the grammar, vocabulary, form, and content of the Greek versions of these words dated them to be no earlier than the 2nd and 3rd centuries, Common Era. They were not written by an ancient Egyptian sage, he claimed, but by scholars in the city of Alexandria. Their philosophy was nothing more than an exotic blend of Greek, Christian, and Jewish philosophy mixed up with astrology and magic. That sounds interesting. I'm like, what's wrong with this guy? He doesn't like Alexandria? No, he's just, the counterpoint. No, he's just trying to say this wasn't written back in Atlantean or ancient Egyptian times by an Egyptian sage. In my own personal opinion, without knowing anymore, I would think that he's half right. I would think that the people in Alexandria had, some kind of leftover remnants of the knowledge, much like what survived and made it to Florence in the Renaissance many hundreds and hundreds of years later. And so he might be half right. But like Hermes himself has written, there will come a time when this knowledge will return, when we are ready for it. I'm trying to find that little bit, but I'm not seeing it here. Maybe that's in the other book. No, right here he says, be hidden until an older heaven births human beings who are worthy of your wisdom. So there will be a time, it says, be unseen and undiscovered by all those who will come and go. All those who are not ready to receive the wisdom, ladies and gentlemen. But so he's saying that this couldn't have been no earlier than the 2nd and 3rd centuries. They were not written by an ancient sage. I'm, on the fence, but it's all up for speculation. I think the wisdom and the philosophy itself is what's really important. But Casaubon kept saying, he goes, their philosophy was just this exotic blend of Greek, Christian, and Jewish philosophy mixed up with astrology and magic. Well, the astrology and magic and the mixing up of those things is what the Christian and the Judeo-Christian and the Islamic traditions were all deeming as paganism. So, interesting. The Egyptian names that pepper the text were mere decoration and ornament. This is the thoughts and the ideas of Isaac Casaubon trying to discredit the Hermetica. And so Casaubon was one of the most brilliant Greek scholars of his time, and with the encouragement of the Christian status quo, we're starting to see his bias, his damning the criticism was generally accepted. Casaubon had dealt with the Egyptian sage. He had dealt the Egyptian sage a fatal blow, and the books of Hermes were destined to be forgotten as fakes and forgeries. That son of a... Dang it, ladies and gentlemen. So what happened? Because we're talking about it now here today. So how did it survive? How was it not forgotten as fakes and forgeries, ladies and gentlemen? We could leave it off there. That'd be a lot of suspense, but I am not going to do that to you. Let's continue a little bit here and make it to the wisdom of the pharaohs, which will be the next section. In the modern world, the book continues, we know from the actions of the tabloid press how one well-timed hatchet job can unjustifiably undermine someone's reputation that has long stood for good. And it's usually just when these individuals go against the status quo, as we just read a few lines earlier. And so we're beginning to see here how this can happen and how this has happened for a long time, ladies and gentlemen. This is called propaganda in the opposite direction. Tells you convince enough people that something's, it's phony and silly. That's just a conspiracy theory. He's just a tinfoil hat wearer. Those silly conspiracies, you see where we're coming from, ladies and gentlemen. And you can see how one well-timed hatchet job of somebody who's going against the status quo can definitely undermine their reputation for good. This is exactly what happened, the book continues, to thrice great Hermes Trismegistus. Casaubon was a fine scholar, but he was motivated by a hidden political agenda. Well, see, this is wrapping up real sense. It's making perfect sense for me, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're picking up what is being put down here. He was a fine scholar, so he had a lot of respect by a lot of people, especially when it came to talking about these subjects, because, he's the finest Greek scholar. So if he knows, despite being motivated by a hidden political agenda, which you would never come out and tell people that, the ultra-Orthodox, that sounds scary, ultra-Orthodox, the ultra-Orthodox James I was now on the throne of England, and he employed Casaubon and the others to purge the magically inclined court of Elizabeth. Wow. Wow. So, ladies and gentlemen, there was a time when Queen Elizabeth I had a magical court, or had a court of, Hermeticists and Platonic philosophers and wisdom keepers who practiced alchemy, astrology, magic, and different things. Hopefully not in the darkest way, although that's always up for debate. Remember, we're trying to keep the philosophy in the light and the wisdom in the light. Now, can't believe it happens like this every time. It's like even when it survives, they just discredit it and, propaganda against it. They get one of the best scholars. So after this guy, James I, who's ultra-Orthodox, he's like 100% party line, status quo, whatever is supposed to be, we know. Anyways, he's now on the throne, and he employed this Casaubon to propagandize and hatchet job and unjustify the reputation of this ancient wisdom because of a hidden political agenda. And so he, along with others that was employed by this new James I, who's now on the throne of England, they purged the magically inclined court of Elizabeth. Hermeticists like John Dee were ostracized. Later, Casaubon's son Merrick wrote a book which portrayed the great philosopher as a confused occultist. Wouldn't that be just like a dark undertaking in its own, to write a whole book to portray a great hermeticist and philosopher that worked for Queen Elizabeth I? Now, I'm not saying, he was the best individual. I'm just saying to portray this individual as just a confused occultist. And then it says Dee died alone and forgotten. I don't know if that's the truth, but That's what it says here. It makes it a real sad story. Nonetheless, so the book continues, some of Casaubon's claims regarding the Hermetica are true. The books of Hermes are undoubtedly the products of many authors, not one ancient sage, which is how all knowledge is passed down through time anyways, dude. So come on. And they were certainly composed in the first few centuries of our era. Hermes was credited with these writings, even though we know they were composite work of many scholars. But this does not discredit them or Hermes, either them or Hermes. Remember that line from Hermes. I don't know exactly where it was. I think we'll find it again, but he talks about right here. Here it is. My teachings, this is from Hermes, or from the Corpus Hermeticum. Hermes writes, my teachings will be seen more obscure in times to come when they are translated from our Egyptian mother tongue into that of the Greeks, which is exactly what this Casaubon was talking about, what happened in Alexandria. He's going, oh, it's just a creation of the Greeks and the Alexandria, compilation of, Christian and Jewish and these different ideas with magic in it, some Egyptian symbolism as a decoration and ornament. But even Hermes knew of this man in this time to come, says that this translation will distort much of their meaning. So it was like a disclaimer anyway. So Casaubon saying this is an idiot, and he missed the disclaimer, ladies and gentlemen. It's in there. But Hermes says the teachings are clear and simple. I think what he means there is you don't need the source. All you need is the wisdom. He says the very sound of an Egyptian word resonates with the things signified by it. But its utterances are replete with power. So Hermes warns us of the translation into a Greek and, further into where we are now today, ladies and gentlemen, into our sloppy English. Or maybe English isn't so sloppy. I don't know. Who's to judge? But as you can see, there's many sides and many viewpoints to this story that this is just me and my own, extrapolations and what resonates with me and what I'm connecting the dots here in this research. I'm not the ultimate scholar on this subject, ladies and gentlemen. So if you do know more and you'd like to talk to me about this, hit me up in an email below. I don't want you to come destroy the Hermetica, though, ladies and gentlemen. Anyways, nonetheless, this happens, and this happens throughout history, to where these hatchet jobs on things that have a great reputation for hidden political agendas to hide what is against the party line. So even though we know they're the composite work of many scholars, this doesn't discredit either them or Hermes. It was a common practice in antiquity for authors to ascribe their work to the god who gave them their inspiration. Like, think of it like if you're like me and you've come to know in the force or the source or the Tao or grand organized design or God, whatever it be for you, ladies and gentlemen, that power that is beating our hearts and breathing our lungs and growing the flowers and blowing the snow in the wind and creating the drifts. And I can ramble on endlessly in that line of things, but this force, we must know, is inspiring us. Have you ever felt that you did something and someone was like, how did you do that? And you're like, I don't know. I don't know how I could do it. There's a great story where a guy gives a rendition of, a great play. I don't know if it was Hamlet or whatever. He does a great rendition of this play, and he gets a standing ovation by the audience, and it was amazing, and everybody's clapping. It's the most incredible version of that we've ever heard. And his friend, follows him to the back there, and backstage, and he slams the door, and the composer is upset and angry. And his friend goes, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? You just did the best version of that thing ever. He goes, yes, but I don't know if I can ever do it again because I don't know how I did it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is inspiration. And so these authors in antiquity would ascribe their work to the God who gave them their inspiration. Even Wayne Dyer said at times, writing the Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao, going through the verses of the Tao Te Ching with the image of Lao Tzu, or, thought, the idea of what maybe Lao Tzu looked like, but he sometimes thought that Lao Tzu was writing through him from 2,500 years ago to communicate to an audience in our modern world, which is great. I think that's great, ladies and gentlemen. Continuing with what the book says here, quote, this was a mark of respect, not an attempt to deceive. See, nowadays we're so caught up in, all this, oh, you're a faker and you're a copier and you're a this. It's like, this is a mark of respect, not an attempt to deceive, ladies and gentlemen. On the second charge, Casaubon is also right to claim that the Hermetica was written down in the 2nd century Alexandria, but all the modern evidence suggests that it does, in fact, express Egyptian beliefs filtered through the understanding of the Greek scholars of the period, which makes perfect sense. I'm like, it's not like we had time-traveling Egyptian sages that came to Alexandria. Like, we had the wisdom that was kept in certain circles of, the Egyptian priests or whatever they were called, that they didn't handle lightly. They weren't just giving this out to everybody. Even some of the Greeks that visited the sages in Egypt to learn from the Egyptian priests and masters, these Egyptians told the Greeks, you are young children in your culture. Your culture is very young, and you have very little of this ancient knowledge. I forget where that comes from, but that's another one of these great stories. All the modern evidence suggests that it does, in fact, express Egyptian beliefs filtered through the understanding of the Greek scholars of the period in Alexandria. Even if all of Casaubon's criticisms were correct, this would neither diminish the Hermetica's wisdom nor alter the fact that it is profoundly, this is the most important part, the reason that I'm doing this history of the Hermetica, even if all of these criticisms are correct, that it's just silliness and there was an ancient Egyptian sage and this was made up by a bunch of Greek, Christian, Jewish people mixing astrology and magic together with Egyptian symbolism. There's just silliness. Even if Casaubon's criticism were correct, this neither debater or whoever is out there saying this is fake and this is false and this is no good. You can't get any wisdom from things that people just made up back in Alexandria. Even if all of these criticisms were correct, this would neither diminish the wisdom from these ideas itself, nor alter the fact that they have profoundly influenced some of the greatest times in history and the greatest minds in history. As old as the Christian Gospels and older than the Quran, it is one of, or the Quran, however you pronounce that, even older than both of these, it is one of the great sacred texts of the world, and it is worthy of respect and study for these reasons alone. Boom, ladies and gentlemen, knocked it out of the park. That's a good one. A debate against the validity of the esoteric occult knowledge of the thrice great Hermes. Fascinating. Fascinating. Well, you can't debunk it, Casaubon, because it is one of the great sacred texts of the world, and it is worthy of respect and study for the simple fact that it has profoundly influenced some of the greatest minds in history. Powerful, ladies and gentlemen. So next week, we'll run into the wisdom of the Pharaohs, which is the title of the book, but It says at the beginning of the next section, when Casaubon was writing, very little was actually known about ancient Egypt. The hieroglyphs themselves were not translated until 2 centuries later, consequently. So this guy, anyways. Later, we find out a lot more about the hieroglyphs and their relation to those expounded in the Hermetica. Ladies and gentlemen, hope you liked that one. That's a boom to wisdom. That's a boom to the wisdom of the ages, and a boom to the wisdom or an understanding of the history of the Hermetica. That was a great episode. I hope I can think of a good title that will, get people interested to want to actually watch this video, because it's so fascinating to me, the different things that's covered. Like this was covering, is the Hermetica just a conspiracy theory? And there's a certain way to put that into a sentence that maybe that's the best way. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. I love and appreciate all of you, and I really enjoyed this series. It's the best performing series I've done. I don't know if that's just because I've used keywords like esoteric and occult and stolen history and stuff like that. But nevertheless, this is fun for me, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope it's fun for you. I enjoy researching these kind of topics, and this is, like I said, I'm no scholar, I'm no master on the understanding of these times of history, or I know as much as I research, as much as I watch on videos and discover here with you on the channel, ladies and gentlemen. So we're on this journey together, and it's just me in my mind and pulling down from the Akasha principle to give some information, entertainment, edutainment, ladies and gentlemen, educational entertainment, and to expound our wonder and our interest in the idea of enlightenment in creating a better quality of life, not only for us, but for those around us in our lives. Remember, great change begins with an individual, but most importantly, within the individual. And so remember, ladies and gentlemen, to seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through a greater awareness and a greater understanding of the wisdom of the ages. Seek to discover that wisdom of the ages, and remember, there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way, ladies and gentlemen. So we got to bring it to life. It's got to be the activity that we bring to the journey. And then the goals that we've been telling ourselves, oh, I'll be happy when I get there. That's irrelevant, because we're already there. And then the entire journey is wonderful. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Be sure to subscribe if you already are subscribed. Leave me a comment. I love to hear from you, and I love getting back to you, replying to comments. It's been a lot of fun lately. I've gotten more comments in the last month than I think I ever have on this channel. So thank you so much. I really love and appreciate all of you that spend time here with me and Dr. Wayne Dyer, and Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy, and all the wonderful authors and poets in the wisdom of the ages, and Hermes, thrice greatest, Trismegistus. All right, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to check the description below as well. Get yourself a copy of this book for yourself to put it on your bookshelf, as well as a link to my landscape paintings and C60 Purple Power, the ultimate antioxidant known to man. It's surprising that I can just ramble all of that from memory. I've done it so many times, it just pops in my mind in sequence, so I can say all of that. But I was thinking while I was rambling all that, holy cow, man, do you have all that memorized? I guess so, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know, but landscape paintings. All right. Love you, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you next week on Tuesday Tao, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao with Dr. Wayne Dyer, and Wednesday Wisdom, more history of the Hermetica, getting into the lost wisdom of the Pharaohs with hieroglyphics and how that affects the future and the translations of the Hermetica throughout history. And hopefully I'll do some short videos in between now and then. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, and leave me a comment. All right. Love you, ladies and gentlemen. Stay good.